The whistle's shrill cry sliced through the humid Georgia air. But Jake Harper didn't hear it. His heart thundered louder than the roaring crowd, his cleats sinking into the turf as he stood frozen, the football still clutched in his hands. His twin, Ethan, had just shattered his world with 5 words whispered in the locker room. "I told Coach you're gay." Jake's blue eyes, usually sharp with focus, blurred with betrayal. The Pinewood High Stadium, a cathedral of Friday night lights in their small town of Willow Creek, felt like a cage now. He'd spent years perfecting his spiral, leading the Pinewood Panthers to 3 straight championships. But none of that mattered when Ethan, his mirror image, his confidant, outed him to Coach Reynolds without warning. The memory of that moment burned. It was halftime. The score tied at 14-14 against their rivals, the Clayton Cougars. Jake had been hyping the team, his voice steady despite the pressure, when Ethan pulled him aside. "I thought it would help," Ethan had mumbled, avoiding Jake's gaze. "Coach was asking why you've been off lately. I thought he'd understand." Understand? Coach Reynolds, a man forged in the old-school South, whose idea of understanding was a grunt and a playbook, had benched Jake the second he heard. "We don't need distractions," he'd growled, his eyes cold. By the third quarter, Jake was sidelined, his teammates avoiding him like he was a stranger. Jake's grip tightened on the ball, his knuckles white. He wasn't just the quarterback. He was the heart of this team. Every pass, every sprint, every bruise had poured his soul into Pinewood. And now, because of Ethan's reckless honesty, he was an outcast. The whispers had already started in the stands, the word gay slithering through the crowd like a venomous snake. Willow Creek wasn't ready for this. Neither was Jake. But there was another layer to the pain, one Jake hadn't admitted even to himself until now. He'd been in love with someone on the team, Lucas Rivera, the wide receiver with a crooked smile and a laugh that made Jake's chest ache. Lucas, who caught every pass Jake threw, who lingered after practice to talk about music and dreams, who never judged. Jake had kept his feelings locked away, terrified of ruining their friendship, their team, his life. Now, with his secret exposed, he wondered if Lucas was among those avoiding his gaze. The game clock ticked down. Clayton was driving hard, their defense relentless. Jake's replacement, sophomore Tommy Vance, was crumbling under pressure, throwing wild passes that missed their mark. The Panthers were unraveling, and Jake could feel the weight of every missed play. He glanced at Ethan, sitting on the bench a few feet away, his head bowed. Ethan, who'd always been the softer twin, the artist to Jake's athlete, had thought he was helping. But good intentions didn't fix this. "Harper." Coach Reynolds' voice snapped Jake back. The older man's face was a storm cloud, his clipboard clutched like a weapon. "You still part of this team, or what?" It wasn't an invitation back, it was a challenge. Jake's jaw clenched. He could walk away, let the team crash and burn, let Willow Creek's judgment swallow him whole. Or he could fight. He stood, tossing the ball to the ground. "Put me in, Coach," he said, voice steady despite the chaos in his chest. Reynolds stared, his eyes narrowing. But something shifted, maybe respect, maybe desperation. With 4 minutes left, Jake was back on the field, the crowd's murmurs rising to a dull roar. The huddle was tense. Lucas was there, his dark eyes meeting Jake's for the first time all night. "We got this," Lucas said, his voice low but firm. Jake nodded, his heart stuttering not just from the game, but from the unspoken promise in Lucas's gaze. Maybe not everyone had turned their back. The play was called, a deep pass to Lucas. Jake took the snap, the world slowing as he scanned the field. Clayton's linebackers charged, but he sidestepped, his arm cocking back. The ball soared, a perfect arc under the stadium lights. And Lucas was there, leaping, his hands snatching it from the air. Touchdown. The crowd erupted, but Jake only saw Lucas, jogging back with that crooked smile, like nothing had changed. But everything had changed. As the final seconds ticked down, Jake knew this game was more than a score. It was his defiance, his refusal to be defined by a single word, a single moment. He'd lost his team's trust, but he wasn't done fighting, not for them, not for himself, and maybe, just maybe, for Lucas. The locker room was quiet after the game, the Panthers' 28-21 victory overshadowed by the tension still lingering. Jake leaned against his locker, his body aching but his mind racing. Ethan approached, his steps hesitant. "Jake, I'm so sorry," he whispered, his voice cracking. I thought if you didn't have to hide, you'd be free." Jake wanted to scream, to shove Ethan away, but the pain in his twin's eyes stopped him. Ethan had always been his protector, the one who'd sketch Jake's portrait when he couldn't sleep, who'd listen when their dad's expectations crushed them both. "You don't get to decide that for me," Jake said finally, his voice low. "Not now. Not ever." Ethan nodded, tears brimming. "I know. I messed up. But I'm here. Okay. Whatever happens next." Jake didn't respond, but he didn't turn away either. The rift between them was raw, but they were twins bound by something deeper than words. As Ethan walked away, Lucas appeared, his gear bag slung over his shoulder. "You were incredible out there," he said, his voice warm. "They can't take that from you." Jake's throat tightened. You didn't care." About what Ethan said. Lucas stepped closer, his expression softening. "I care about you, Jake. Always have." The words hung between them, heavy with possibility. Jake's heart raced, but before he could speak, Lucas clapped his shoulder, a gesture both familiar and electric. "See you at practice," he said, leaving Jake standing there, a spark of hope igniting in his chest. Tomorrow, he'd face the team, the town, the truth. But tonight, he'd won. Not just the game, but a piece of himself he'd been too afraid to claim. Monday morning hit Jake like a linebacker. The high of the Friday night victory had faded, replaced by the cold reality of Willow Creek High. The hallways buzzed with whispers, eyes darting toward him as he walked to his locker. He'd expected it. Small towns didn't let secrets die quietly, but the sting was sharper than he'd imagined. His Letterman jacket, once a badge of pride, felt like a target now. He spotted Ethan across the hall, sketching in his notebook, oblivious to the stares. Jake's anger flared, but he pushed it down. Ethan hadn't meant to hurt him, but the damage was done. Coach Reynolds had called a team meeting after school, and Jake knew it wasn't about strategy. It was about him. In English class, Lucas slid into the seat beside him, his presence a quiet anchor. "You okay?" he asked, his voice low enough to avoid the teacher's notice. Jake nodded, but his stomach churned. Lucas's words from Friday, "I care about you," echoed in his mind, a lifeline he didn't dare grasp yet. He wanted to ask what it meant, but fear kept the words locked away. The day dragged, each period a gauntlet of sidelong glances and hushed conversations. By the time Jake reached the locker room for the team meeting, his nerves were raw. The room smelled of sweat and old leather, the air thick with tension. His teammates sat on benches, some avoiding his gaze, others staring openly. Coach Reynolds stood at the front, his arms crossed. "All right, listen up," Reynolds began, his voice gruff. We've got a state championship to chase, and we don't have time for drama. Harper, you're still QB1, but I need to know this team's focused. All of you. His eyes swept the room, lingering on Jake. Anyone got a problem? Speak now. Silence stretched, taut as a wire. Then Tommy Vance, the sophomore who'd fumbled Jake's spot on Friday, stood. I don't get it, he said, his voice shaking but defiant. Why's it matter who he likes? He's still Jake. He's still our guy? A few heads nodded, but others stayed stone-faced. Jake's chest tightened. Tommy's words were a spark, but not enough to light the room. Then Lucas stood, his jaw set. Jake's carried us for 3 years. He's out there bleeding for this team, and you're going to turn on him for something that's none of your business. That's not a team. That's a bunch of cowards. His words cut through the room, sharp and unyielding. Jake stared, his heart pounding. Lucas wasn't just defending him, was fighting for him. Reynolds grunted, unimpressed. Fine. We move forward. But I'm watching. The meeting ended, but the divide lingered. Some teammates clapped Jake's shoulder as they left. Others walked out without a word. Jake stayed, lacing his cleats, trying to process it all. Lucas lingered too, tying his shoes slower than necessary. Thanks, Jake said finally, his voice barely above a whisper. For what you said. Lucas met his eyes, his expression soft but intense. Meant every word. You're not alone in this, Jake. The air between them crackled, and for a moment, Jake thought Lucas might say more. But he just smiled, that crooked grin that made Jake's world tilt, and headed out. Practice was brutal. Jake threw harder, ran faster, as if he could outrun the whispers. Some teammates rallied around him. Others kept their distance. Ethan watched from the bleachers, his sketchbook open, his eyes heavy with guilt. Jake ignored him, focusing on the rhythm of the game, the feel of the ball in his hands. Football was his language, his truth. He wouldn't let anyone take that from him. That night, at home, Jake found Ethan in their shared bedroom, sketching a portrait of the stadium under the lights. I'm trying to fix this, Ethan said, not looking up. I know I screwed up, but I'm trying. Jake sat on his bed, exhaustion settling in. You can't fix it, Ethan. Not yet. But don't stop being you. I need that. It wasn't forgiveness. Not fully, but it was a start. Ethan nodded, a flicker of hope in his eyes. The week blurred into a grind of practices and games, each one a test of Jake's resilience. The team was winning, but the cracks remained. Lucas was his constant, his anchor catching every pass, offering quiet words of support. Jake felt the pull toward him growing stronger, but fear still held him back. What if Lucas's loyalty was just friendship? What if Jake's heart was wrong? Friday brought the semifinals against the Macon Tigers. The game was neck and neck, the score 17-17 at halftime. Jake felt the weight of every play, knowing the town was watching, judging. During a timeout, Lucas grabbed his helmet, their faces inches apart. You're bigger than this game, Jake, he said fiercely. Don't forget that. Jake nodded, his throat tight. As the second half began, he threw himself into the game. Every pass a defiance, every yard a declaration. The Panthers won 24-20, and the crowd roared. But Jake's eyes found Lucas, sprinting toward him with that grin. For the first time all week, Jake let himself hope not just for the championship, but for something more. The state championship loomed, a week away, but Jake's world felt like it was teetering on a knife's edge. Willow Creek was buzzing half with pride for their Panthers, half with gossip about their quarterback. Jake heard it all, the slurs scrawled on his locker, the awkward silences when he entered a room, the occasional "we're with you" from unexpected allies like Tommy Vance. But the noise faded when he was on the field, where the game made sense, where Lucas's presence made everything bearable. Lucas. Jake couldn't shake the memory of his words in the huddle, the way his eyes held Jake's with an intensity that felt like more than friendship. They'd always been colossal at night talks after practice, shared playlists, moments where Jake swore Lucas's hand lingered too long on his shoulder. But now, with his secret out, Jake was terrified to misread the signals. Losing Lucas as a friend would hurt worse than losing the team. At school, Ethan was trying to make amends. He'd started a quiet campaign, talking to classmates, explaining Jake's truth with a sincerity that disarmed some of the haters. It wasn't enough to change Willow Creek, but it was something. Jake caught Ethan in the art room one day, working on a mural of the team, Jake's silhouette at the center. "It's for the championship," Ethan said, paint smudging his cheek. "To remind everyone who you are." Jake's throat tightened. "I'm still mad," he admitted. "But, thanks." Ethan's eyes lit up, and for a moment, they were just twins again, not a hero and a traitor. Practice was relentless as the championship neared. Coach Reynolds pushed harder, but his gruff demeanor softened slightly. Jake's performance was undeniable. The team was fractured, but Jake's arm was a bridge. Lucas, Tommy, and a few others rallied around him, their loyalty a shield against the doubters. Still, Jake felt the weight of every missed connection, every teammate who wouldn't meet his eyes. The night before the championship, Jake couldn't sleep. He slipped out to the stadium, the field silent under the stars. He wasn't expecting Lucas to be there, sitting in the bleachers, his breath visible in the chilly air. Couldn't sleep either. Lucas asked, his voice warm. Jake sat beside him, their shoulders brushing. "Feel like everything's riding on tomorrow. The game, the team, me." Lucas turned, his dark eyes searching Jake's. "You're not just the game, Jake. You're more than that. Always have been." The words hit like a tidal wave, and Jake's heart raced. He wanted to ask, to confess, but fear choked him. Instead, he just nodded, letting the silence hold them. The championship against the Augusta Eagles was a war. The Superdome in Atlanta was a far cry from Willow Creek's small stadium, the crowd a sea of noise. Jake felt every eye on him, but he locked it out, focusing on the snap, the play, the rhythm. The score was 14-10, Eagles leading at halftime. Jake was playing flawlessly, but the team's chemistry was off. Too many dropped passes, too many missed blocks. In the locker room, Reynolds pulled Jake aside. "You're carrying this team, Harper, but they're not carrying you. Fix it." It wasn't encouragement, it was a demand. Jake nodded, his jaw tight, and returned to the huddle. He looked at his teammates, some supportive, some distant. "This is our shot," he said, his voice steady. "Not for me, not for you, for us. We're a team. Act like it." Something shifted. The second half was electric. Jake's passes were lasers, and Lucas was everywhere, catching impossible throws, dodging defenders. Tommy blocked like a man possessed, and even the doubters started to sink. With 2 minutes left, down 17-14, Jake called a trick playa reverse to Lucas, who sprinted 40 yards for a touchdown. The crowd exploded, and Jake tackled Lucas in celebration, their laughter a release of everything pent up. The Panthers won 21-17. The Superdome roared, But Jake only saw Lucas, his grin brighter than the stadium lights. As they jogged off the field, Lucas grabbed Jake's arm. "I'm proud of you," he said, his voice low. "Not just for this." Jake's heart stopped. He wanted to speak, to say everything he'd buried. But the moment was cut short by the team swarming them, hoisting the trophy. Ethan was there too, in the stands, cheering louder than anyone. For the first time in weeks, Jake felt whole. The championship high didn't last. Back in Willow Creek, the trophy sat in the school's display case, but the town's whispers grew louder. Jake was a hero to some, a pariah to others. He walked the halls with his head high, but each slur, each cold shoulder, chipped away at him. Ethan was trying harder, organizing a small GSA club at school, leaving sketches of Jake on his desk with notes like, "You're enough." It helped, but the rift between them wasn't healed. Lucas was the constant. They started hanging out more, grabbing burgers at Rosie's Diner, driving to the lake to skip rocks. Every moment felt charged, like a storm brewing. Jake wanted to tell Lucas everything, but the fear of rejection was a wall he couldn't climb. What if Lucas was just being a friend? What if Jake's heart was wrong? One night, at the lake, Lucas broke the silence. "You ever feel like you're hiding something, even when everyone already knows?" he asked, tossing a stone into the water. Jake froze, his pulse racing. "Yeah," he said quietly. "All the time." Lucas turned, his eyes soft but piercing. "I've been hiding too, Jake. For a long time." He stepped closer, his breath warm in the cool night air. "I didn't know how to say it, but it's you. It's always been you." Jake's world tilted. Before he could think, he closed the gap, their lips meeting in a kiss that felt like freedom. It was tentative at first, then fierce, years of unspoken longing spilling over. When they pulled back, Lucas's crooked smile was back, and Jake laughed, a sound of pure relief. But Willow Creek wasn't ready for them. The next day, a photo of their kiss snapped by some kid with a phone spread like wildfire. By lunch, Jake's locker was vandalized, the word "fag" scrawled in red. Lucas stood by him, his hand brushing Jake's in silent support. But the hate was suffocating. Coach Reynolds called them into his office, his face grim. "I don't care what you do off the field," he said, "but this is stirring up trouble. Keep it quiet." Jake wanted to scream. Quiet. He'd been quiet his whole life. But Lucas squeezed his hand, grounding him. "We're not hiding," Lucas said, his voice steady. Reynolds sighed, but didn't argue. The backlash grew. Jake's dad, a stoic mechanic who'd always pushed him to be tough, barely spoke to him. Ethan, though, was a rock, confronting their dad, rallying friends. "You don't get to pick who he loves," Ethan told their father one night, his voice shaking but firm. Jake watched, torn between gratitude and guilt. Ethan was fighting his battles, but the cost was high. At school, the GSA meeting drew a small crowd. Tommy, a few cheerleaders, even a teacher. Jake and Lucas attended, their hands clasped under the table. It wasn't much, but it was a start. Jake spoke, his voice raw. "I didn't choose this, but I'm done being ashamed. I just want to be me." The room was quiet. Then Tommy clapped, and others joined. It wasn't the whole town, but it was enough for now. As spring turned to summer, Jake and Lucas grew closer, their love a quiet rebellion. They'd drive to Atlanta, where no one knew them, holding hands in coffee shops, laughing like the world wasn't watching. But back home, the tension lingered. Jake knew the biggest game wasn't the championship, it was living his truth in a town that wasn't ready. Graduation was a month away, and Jake felt like he was running out of time. Willow Creek was changing slowly, but the scars of the past months lingered. His dad was still distant, though he'd started asking about Jake's college plans. A small olive branch. Ethan was accepted to an art school in Savannah. His sketches now filled with images of Jake and Lucas. A quiet apology in every stroke. Jake and Lucas were inseparable, their love a beacon in the storm. They'd sit on the hood of Lucas's truck, dreaming about college, about a world where they could just be. Lucas had a scholarship to Georgia Tech, and Jake was waiting on UGA. The idea of being apart ached, but they vowed to make it work. The final challenge came unexpectedly. A group of parents, led by a loudmouth pastor, demanded Jake and Lucas be banned from the senior prom, citing community values. The school board wavered, but Ethan and the GSA fought back, organizing a petition that gained traction online. To Jake's shock, half the team signed it, including Tommy and even Coach Reynolds. "You're my quarterback," Reynolds told him privately. "I was wrong to doubt you." Prom night was a victory. Jake and Lucas walked in hand, defying the glares. Ethan was there, beaming, his date a shy girl from the art club. The gym was a riot of color, and when Jake and Lucas danced, the world faded away. It wasn't perfect, some kids left. Some parents scowled, but it was theirs. The summer after graduation was a turning point. Jake's dad finally sat him down, his voice gruff but earnest. "I don't understand it, son, but I love you. Always will." Jake cried, the weight of years lifting. Ethan, too, found peace, his art a bridge between them. He gave Jake a sketch of the championship moment. Jake and Lucas mid-embrace. The caption reading, "The biggest win." Jake and Lucas moved to Athens for college. A new chapter. Willow Creek would always be home, but it no longer defined them. They'd faced the worst betrayal, hate, fear, and come out stronger. Jake realized the biggest game of his life wasn't the championship, or even prom. It was the courage to love, to forgive, to be himself. Years later, at a Pinewood reunion, Jake stood on the old field, Lucas's hand in his. Ethan was there, now a rising artist, his murals decorating the school. The town had changed slower than Jake wanted, but it had changed. Kids like him could walk a little taller now. As he looked at Lucas, then Ethan, then the stadium lights, Jake knew he'd won not just a game, but a life worth living.